Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be talking about my worst books of 2018. So I don't often give 1-star ratings. I can generally accept that sometimes a book is not for me, and so I have only actually given one 1-star rating this year. I have 8 books to talk to you about today. One of these did not receive a 2-star rating. I kind of rated it quite highly at the time, but the more I think about it, the more I really hate it. So we'll leave that one to last. But like I said, 8 books. I hated them all. Let's just get into it. So the first book that I despised this year was 13 Reasons Why by J. Asher. Now I know a lot of you guys do have a problem with the TV show, but I kind of really love angsty teenage drama. That being said, I don't like the show as much as I did when I watched the first season because it went a bit too far, but I wanted to read the book anyway. I think what I was actually doing was I was watching one episode of the show, which is like one tape, and then reading that chapter of the book. There are some things in the book that were done better than the show, and some things in the show that were done better than the book. I think overall, I think that the show, while not being a healthy representation of anything really, I still think it was a healthier representation than what was portrayed in the book. As you guys probably know, 13 Reasons Why follows a girl called Hannah Baker who has decided to take her own life. She leaves a set of cassette tapes. Each tape is dedicated to a different person and essentially explaining the reasons why they played a part in her killing herself. So obviously not a great subject matter, not something that can really be done well, especially in this scandalous, sensational manner. In the TV show, you get a sense of people trying to right the wrongs of what has been done to Hannah. Some of the things that were done to her were quite unspeakable. Some of them were illegal. And in the show, they do pursue this to try and get justice for Hannah, even though, like, maybe she shouldn't have done what she did based on what happened to her. The show definitely pursues some sort of retribution for those who have greatly wronged her, not in the petty teenage drama way, but those that actually did very bad things to her. In the book, you get to the end and all of the tapes are done. Then it's just like, oh cool, I listened to those tapes. End of book. There's no maybe thinking like, okay, the person who did this one specific thing to Hannah is a very bad person and maybe I should report this to the police. There's no sense of these people need to be held accountable for their actions. It's literally like, oh, this atrocious thing was done to Hannah. Cool. Now I'll move on with my life. So it got 2 stars mainly for that reason. Also, it wasn't a very well written book. It wasn't an enjoyable read, just generally like bad. But that's the thing that really tipped me over the edge and was like, I really hate this book. Then we have White Cat by Holly Black. This is the first book in the Curse Workers series. I'm not going to say I can't stand Holly Black because that's harsh. I just really don't like her books. I don't think she does a lot of world building. You're just kind of thrown into the world, and then a lot of times, especially in the case of this one book, it's not explained. Like by the time I got to the end of the book, I still wasn't sure what was going on. This book follows a series. It's kind of like an urban fantasy, and it's a family who are like black witches and they have certain powers, and the main character has to wear gloves because if he touches people something happens. I read this in January, so like I'm kind of foggy, but essentially it was never explained why he could do this. It was never expanded upon if other people could really do this. There was no development to the world. By the time I got to the end of the book, I still wasn't really sure about the magic system or what was possible, what was not. And yeah, it's just the world building. It's a lack of world building and a lack of building magic systems in Holly Black's book that I just really cannot stand. I've already read The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black as well, but when I read this book I was like, I'm not giving her another try. Like that's it, I'm done with Holly Black. Then we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is a mystery thriller and it is about a woman who is not doing so good. She is offered the opportunity through work to go on this trip on this exclusive cruise. It's a very small cruise. There's going to be very highly influential people there, and she is going to write a travel article about it for the publication that she works for. When she is on board the ship, she is convinced that somebody was thrown overboard and she wants to get to the bottom of this mystery. However, she is the only person who saw it happen, seemingly. So my problems with this one, I don't really like mystery thrillers, okay? Like I'm not a mystery thriller kind of person. I'm more like domestic, psychological. Those are the ones that I like. But I didn't know it was like a mystery thriller going into it. I listened to the audiobook, and while I think the audiobook is well done, a personal pet peeve of mine was the accent. I hated her accent, I hated the narrator's voice, but that's not why it's on this list and that's not why I hated it. I hated it because I don't know if this is a recurring stereotype, but it seemed to me just from reading this book like, oh, I've read this character a million times before. She's a woman in her mid-30s. She has a casual alcohol dependency. She thinks she's a failure at life and has no sort of self-worth or self-confidence. Think like Bridget Jones. I feel like there's a lot of Bridget Jones type characters in British literature, especially like thrillers, chick lit, that kind of thing. She was very much like a cookie cutter Bridget Jones type character. Also, another thing is that I felt like she brought everything that happened in the book on herself. So she sees this woman thrown overboard. Nobody else has a clue. First off, she was very, very drunk when it happened. She was also suffering from PTSD because the reason she was so eager to go on the trip is that her house was broken into and she was terrified. So she's been having dreams about intruders and people breaking in and trying to harm her. So she gets very, very drunk. She falls asleep. She's woken up in the middle of the night by a splash. So she sees somebody be thrown over the ship, and then people keep telling her, like, look, it never happened. There are no people missing off this ship. There is no possible way that this person that you think was thrown over the ship was actually thrown over the ship. Everyone's fine. Calm the fuck down, shut up and get on with your job. So what does she do? She keeps digging and digging and digging, and people keep telling her, girl, you're crazy, and she keeps going and going and going, which I understand. If she didn't, there would be no book, but I also think a normal person in that situation would kind of be like, okay, so it felt really real, but I've suffered a trauma, I was really drunk, I probably imagined it, or they just throw a bag over and I'm just like daydreaming and it's pretty much all in my head. That is what a normal person would do, but not the main character of this book, and that is why I hated it. The only 1-star review I gave this year was This Girl by Colleen Hoover. This is the 3rd book in the Slam series. The Slam series follows Lake and don't remember the guy's name anymore, but essentially it was like a 3-star series for me, the first 2 books. It follows a forbidden romance between a student and a teacher. They kind of start falling for each other. She's just moving into town and she's 18. He's a very young teacher and I think like he's still doing his teacher training, and then it comes to the first day of school because it's been like over a break period when she was moving in. Comes to the first day of school, she finds out that he's her teacher. It's called Slammed because it has a lot to do with slam poetry. Trashy romance, 3 stars, okay. Read the 3rd book in the series and it is the exact same plot of the 1st book told from the guy's perspective, and it's just so unnecessary. It added absolutely nothing. There was not really any additional scenes. There was nothing that he was doing outside of the narrative of the girl that you followed in the 1st book that really needed expanding upon. He wasn't doing anything interesting. It was pretty much scene by scene, the 1st book from his perspective. Completely pointless, and then it adds on an extra like 2 chapters right at the end that sort of wraps up their storyline in the present day. Completely pointless. Should not have been written. Don't know why it existed, and I hate it a lot. Then we have Sal, and I got this from the library. I believe it was by Mick Kitson, and this is the story of 2 girls called Sal and Pepper. Sal is being abused by her stepfather kind of figure. It's not like an official stepfather, but her mum's boyfriend is abusing her, and he threatens Sal that if she doesn't do what he wants, then he's going to start on her little sister Pepper, because Pepper is almost at the age that Sal started being abused. So Sal has been watching a lot of survivalist videos on YouTube. She watches a lot of Bear Grylls, and she concocts this plan for her and Pepper to run away to the forests in Scotland and just survive there in the wilderness, away from her irresponsible mother and the abusive stepdad. My problems with this is that it was a stream of consciousness from this, I think she's like 13-year-old girl, and it was just streams and streams and streams of survivalist pointless information that was irrelevant. The abuse was never a focal point of the plot. It was all just about them being in the woods for however long they're there, how to skin rabbit, Sal going on and on about how she'd watched a video about how to make a hat from a rabbit, and it just really wasn't for me. I don't think I like stream of consciousness. I feel like it was also kind of a slice of life kind of book. It didn't really have a whole lot of plot. Like there was a beginning, there was an end, there was all the bits in the woods. And then there's also a part at the end which also made me really not like it, where a big decision about one of the main characters is about to be made, and it's like a really big deal, and then you never find out the verdict of that. The book kind of just ends as they're on the way to find out the decision. So it's very slice of lifey, not a lot of plot, and kind of the things that are going on around the periphery of them being in the woods doesn't matter, and it's just about the survivalist story in the woods. However, that's not what it was penned as, that's not what I expected, and I really didn't like it. So the only one of these that I own is P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. If you have seen my most disappointing reads of 2018, you will see that the first book in this trilogy was on there. This one was worse. I'm not going to go too much into what this is about because most of you guys know, and I have said it like repeatedly recently, but this was just a rehashing of the plot of the first book. Margot wasn't in it as much, so she wasn't annoying, but like she still does really annoying, preachy, judgmental things and nobody challenges her on it. There is a conflict that shouldn't have been a conflict. Lara Jean just won't come out and say, I have a problem with you doing this, stop doing this. She's all like, oh, well, it's not my place to say, and oh, who is texting you? Oh, and sorry, I had a moment there. The ending of this book was not quite as abrupt as the first one, but it was still really abrupt. There's a whole conflict through the middle. You get to the end, and in the last 2 chapters, one of the characters comes up to Lara Jean, says about 5 lines, and then within 20 pages, it's resolved, it's done, fly off into the sunset together. Lara Jean reads ridiculously young, she's ridiculously naive, she hasn't grown from the first book, she's still slut-shaming, she's not confronting her problems, and like I said in my disappointing reads, this is not me just bashing on a young adult book because I'm too old for it, because to be honest, the best part of this book, and the reason it didn't get 1 star, is because I am trash for Peter Kavinsky. So like, I still get the value of that. It's just I don't like the writing. I don't like the cheesy, vomit-inducing metaphors. I don't like Lara Jean. I think she's a wet lettuce. I hate Margot with a passion. I hate the way that Lara Jean idolizes Margot, even though that wasn't as prominent in this book as it was in the first one. And there's just like a whole lot of things that I really don't like about this. However, I am going to read the 3rd book in the series because, like I said, trash for Peter Kavinsky, needs to know what happens in book 3. This was supposed to be the last book in the series. It was supposed to be a duology, and everybody like loved this. Like, I knew before the movie came out that everybody really loved this series, and I just don't know why. This is very weak as a final book in a duology. If this was the actual last book, I would be like severely disappointed by the way that this story wraps up. It was just not good. Another book that I read very recently was Messenger by Lois Lowry. Now, this is a children's dystopian utopian book, and the 3rd book in the Giver Quartet. Now, things I didn't like about this book: it has a very strong political undercurrent running through it. It talks about politics, it talks about immigration, not in direct terms. Essentially, we have our main character Matt, who was a side character in the 2nd book, who is in a different place that is like supposed to be a better society, and it's a society that welcomes everybody. It sort of welcomes the people who have been banished from other societies or who have left other societies looking for a better life. You see there how it connects to immigration already. So then you continue on, and the people in this town are sort of, they're changing, they're becoming a lot more nasty. At one point in the book, this new group of people comes to town, and people are petitioning that they want the borders closing. This woman comes up to Matt, she looks really sad, and he asks her what's wrong, and she says, oh, I'm worried about my children. And he's like, oh no, it's okay, because you're already here, so even if the town closes, you're still welcome, you'll be fine. And she says, oh no, my sister's supposed to be coming with the rest of my children, and I'm worried that they won't be allowed in. This is a children's book, okay? This situation is very similar to what has been happening in the US and what is happening in the UK at the minute regarding immigration, and I don't feel like that has a place in children's literature. On a moral front, we know what is right and we know what is wrong, and we know what we should do regarding things like immigration. However, what is not explained in the book and what children can't grasp is the practicalities, population, things like that. Like, I don't really want to go too into it, but like, I'm just struggling with words, but I just don't think it's right. I just don't think it's right to have political undercurrents like that in a children's book. If you have read more middle grade and children's books than I, because I admit I haven't read a lot, please let me know whether this is okay, whether this is normal, because it just kind of irks me, you know, but I haven't read enough middle grade or children's books to sort of know whether this is like a normal thing. So after that long rant, the other thing that really annoyed me about this is that magical realism just exists. It just appears out of nowhere. Just magic exists in this world third book in a series. Magic hasn't existed before, really, just like an inkling of something, which could have been like talent. Like the way that it was written before, it could have been like these people have raw talent and it's like magic. However, in this one, magic just pops up, somebody has magical abilities, not explained, no context, just appears, what is going on. And then the ending of the book. Despite those things I mentioned, this book could have been my favourite one in the series so far, because the overarching plot was different from the first two books, which were just like the second one was a rehash of the first, and I found it a lot more interesting than I did the first two books. However, the ending was bad. I didn't like the ending, and it just ended abruptly, like all books in this series do. Like boom, this thing happened, book over. And then lastly, the last book I'm going to talk about today is, drumroll please, The Upside of Unrequited by Becca. I rate this book 5 stars, and I'm going to go through my thought process of this. Okay, I hated this book the entire time that I was reading it, but when I got to the end, I sort of took a message from it that I thought was really powerful when applied to myself. But this book follows, I think she's called Molly, it follows a girl called Molly who's fat, and she has a lot of crushes and they are never requited. She's very close to her twin sister, who is, I don't know if she's a lesbian or bi, but her twin sister gets a girlfriend, and Molly is quite jealous because she's never had to share her sister before. Her sister has always been there for her, and now she wants to spend a lot of time with her girlfriend and less time with her sister. Molly is always moaning and moaning and moaning about boys. Like all of these crushes she's had, she's never said to them like, look, I like you. But in her head, she's like, oh well, I'm fat so they won't like me. And she's so stuck up. She is so stuck up, and it just gets on my nerves, because there's actually one point in the book, I'm just running now. There's one point in the book where she's sat in this room with her sister, her sister's girlfriend, and this boy, and her sister had been trying to hook her up with this boy, and there's another boy as well who's like more attractive, so obviously she can't talk to him because he won't like her because she's fat, so just don't bother talking to him at all. So she's talking to this boy, he's scrolling through his phone, and she's like, oh, he's scrolling through his phone because I'm fat and he doesn't want to talk to me. So then she starts doing something else, or like scrolling through her phone or something, and then he asks her a question and she flat out ignores him. She's like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to me because I'm fat, and then he talks to her and she ignores him because I don't know why. I don't know why. Her entire attitude in this book just drove me crazy. And the reason that I gave it 5 stars to start off with is because when I got to the end, I thought, okay, Molly is a complete bitch. She's stuck up her own arse. She can't see. She's just so self-centered and so inside her head. And I thought, you know what? I had like a serious weight issue when I was younger. It got to me, and I thought, you know what? I was kind of like that. I felt these feelings. I hated myself, and I felt like that was a powerful message, and it reminded me a lot of myself. However, like sides of my teenage years that I'm really not proud of. I've always been quite confident, but like in my head I had like issues, you know. So I gave it a high rating for that, but then the more time goes on, the more I hate Molly, and this hatred for Molly is festering inside of me, and I still kind of stand by giving it a high rating for those reasons, because those reasons existed, and I also really liked the family dynamic in this, and I liked all of the supporting characters. But the more time goes on, the more I hate Molly. She's the most hated character I have read this year. She drives me insane. The more I think about her, the angrier I get, so I had to include this book in my most hated books of the year. Rant over. That is it for my worst books of 2018. Please let me know what you thought of these books. I am sorry if I trashed any of your favorites. It doesn't need to be said. We have different opinions. Everybody does. And I know a lot of you will like The Upside of Unrequited, but Molly just, God, I just don't like her. So please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.